Airbnbs. Seriously, the best way to travel nowadays. It's like a home away from your home. I love it so much that I actually live in different Airbnbs and I'll live in them for months at a time. And I'm currently in one right now and it has everything that I need to enjoy my stay. But not every Airbnb is a winner. Trust me, I've had my fair share of not so great Airbnbs. Let's just say that one time that there was this owner and I'm pretty sure he was doing something illegal, so we just, hopped out of there real quick because it was a little sketchy. But that happened on one of my very first Airbnbs and I've learned a lot since then. I've been doing this for about 2 years, so I kind of feel like I'm qualified to tell you how to find that perfect Airbnb. So here are my 11 tips to finding that perfect Airbnb for your vacation. Before I get into the tips, I will go ahead and give you guys $65 off your first booking on Airbnb. The link is right here, or you can go ahead and go to the link in my description down below. Tip number 1, put in those filters. Once you've decided on a location, which can be a huge decision in itself, you have to put in the date and how many people are going. Now, I know this may seem a little like, well, duh, but if you forget it, it can be like really upsetting whenever you found that perfect Airbnb and they're not available for your dates. Or you want to book a place for 3 people, but really that place can only hold 2. So go ahead and put those in. Don't forget that. That's the very first crucial step to finding that perfect Airbnb. Tip number 2, go on a weekday. Now, this is a tip that if you want to be more on the cheap side on Airbnb, if you go on a weekday whenever you're booking, it can be significantly cheaper than the weekends. Or on the flip side, if you're like me, a digital nomad who wants to live in an Airbnb for like a month at a time, go ahead and choose at least 1 month because you'll see in all the Airbnbs, there is a monthly discount and I've seen ones up to 65% off. So if you're like, oh, well, I'm gonna go for 3 weeks, well, why don't you just kind of push that to 4 and you can go for probably cheaper than ever it would have been if you were there for 3 weeks. Tip number 3 is be flexible. Airbnb has this option where you can do plus or minus 1 day, plus or minus 3 days, plus or minus 7 days. And if you go ahead and click that option, you can go ahead and see the Airbnbs that are available within those dates that you're looking for. Because what if there's like this perfect Airbnb with the most beautiful view, but it's only available like the day before that you put those dates in? If you put that flexibility on there, then you can seriously find a lot better places and a lot more variety of places. Tip number 4. Do not check those small amenities. You know what I'm talking about, like the hangers, the shampoo, a hair dryer, stuff like that. And the reason I say not to do that is because actually a lot of Airbnbs will include that in the Airbnb, but not every host puts that underneath their amenity checklist. So like whenever you scroll down and you see amenities and it'll list like probably 30 amenities that they have, some hosts, they only list the major ones, like a dishwasher or a microwave or something like that. So just start out without those filters on there because if you put hair dryer or hanger, it might not have popped up that perfect Airbnb you're looking for. Tip number 5, necessary amenities. Now, this is kind of piggybacking off of tip number 4, but I feel like it needs to be said. Only check those amenities that are absolutely necessary for you. Like if you're going on a 3-day trip, you can probably live without a dishwasher. Yeah, you have to wash it by hand, so boo-hoo, but you might be able to find a much better place if you just don't click that dishwasher. And remember, you can always start with a few amount of filters, and if there ends up being like 300 plus available properties, then start adding those things that are more of like a luxury, not really a necessity. If you're like, oh, I'd really like a dishwasher, then go ahead and click it, and it might drop that 300 available properties down to like 150. Tip number 6. Stay organized. Now, this is exactly what I do because I like to stay organized with all the properties that I search. Use the save feature. There's a save feature where you can hit the heart and then it adds it to a list. You can rename the list, do whatever you want to name it for your vacation, and then start adding all of the properties that even remotely look good to you. So if you start going through the list of that 150 that you have, and you're just like, at first glance, wow, okay, that place looks nice, it's in my budget, I'm just gonna go ahead and heart it. Now, you go through that whole entire 150 list and you probably end up hearting about 30 of them. This is a great start. And don't get overwhelmed with having like 30 or more in your saved list, because eventually, if you follow all these tips, you'll narrow it down to probably 2 or 3, or if you're lucky, hopefully 1. Tip number 7, Start avoiding those bad listings. Now you're like, okay, well, how do I know if it's a bad listing? Well, part of my process that I go through, now I'm in the 30 that I have in my saved list. I will start looking at all the pictures first. If they have awful pictures, I'm just like, probably not that good. That's just like the first turn off for me for Airbnbs, but that's coming from someone who's a photographer slash videographer, so it might not be that big of a deal to you. And then the next thing that I look at is if the reviews are under 4.5 stars. That's kind of my threshold that I like to go off of, because I mean, if I'm staying there for a month, I want it to be a nice place. Tip number 8, location, location, location. Location is a huge part in finding your Airbnb. Because like if you're wanting to go visit, I don't know, Yellowstone National Park, and you're looking at an Airbnb around there, but it's an hour and a half away from Yellowstone. I mean, yeah, it was a nice Airbnb, but really you're gonna be spending an hour and a half of your day just driving. So you have to weigh the pros and cons and what matters to you. So to way to look at the location, what I do is because Airbnb does not provide the actual location of the Airbnb until you actually book it. So I will look at the map and I'll kind of just look at landmarks around there, and then I'll go to Google Maps. I will click on the satellite view and I will actually see the house before I even go there. That way I know what's around there, what the neighborhood looks like, if I want to go on a walk, all that kind of stuff. Tip number 9, read the reviews. Now, we live in this day and age where reviews are everything, so this should be easy for most of us. But you need to read the reviews, but keep your wits about you. There could be someone who is like giving them a 3-star review because they didn't have the right kind of cooking pan, or they didn't have covered parking, or the couch wasn't as comfortable. Some people give bad reviews when honestly, that place really didn't deserve a bad review. So read all of those reviews and start from the ones that are the most recent. So if you start looking at reviews and you see that it's a year ago, it might not be as up to date as it is if there was ones from a couple weeks ago. So also a good little half tip of that, if the most recent review is like 11 months ago or more, I'd be a little bit iffy about that one, because there hasn't been anyone staying there for close to a year, and that might not be a good sign. So do the digging. And now that you've done all that digging, you should have about 3 or 4 in your list now, which narrows it down significantly from that 150 down to 30, down to probably 10 or so, to 3 or 4. Tip number 10, contact the host. So let's say that now you have a few in your mind that you really like, but you still can't decide on which one you want to go to. They both look great. Then start messaging the host. I always do this, and I just ask them questions if something wasn't clear on their listing. One of the main questions that I usually ask people, because I work online, is I'll ask them what their Wi-Fi speeds are. I know that might not matter to you guys, but to me, I need high Wi-Fi speeds. So I will message the host and they will respond to me. And if they don't respond to me, sorry, you just lost a person who could possibly stay in your Airbnb. Now let's say if I'm going to 2 people and I ask them that question and their Wi-Fi speeds were both great and they both responded to me, I will go with the person who responded the most fast, I will go to the person who responded the quickest. There we go, my grammar is not the best. So what I'm saying about this is just don't be afraid to contact the host. They're usually very friendly people, and if they're not friendly, then hey, you just lucked out on this probably not so good Airbnb. Tip number 11. Use other search engines. Now, I know this is kind of crazy that I'm saying this because we're talking about tips for Airbnb, but when I travel, I like to be more on the cheap side and I like to get the best deal. So let's say that you found that perfect Airbnb, but what I recommend that you do is go to VRBO or booking.com, see if that same listing is on that website, and sometimes it can be for cheaper, like depending on the service fees that are added for that site or anything like that. So just keep doing the digging and you might be able to have that perfect Airbnb for a significantly cheaper price. And this also works too if you just didn't find an Airbnb, which that happens. It's happened to me before. And I'll just go to booking.com or VRBO and I find that whole search starts all over again on that website. So that's all the tips I have for you this time. I hope that you found that super helpful. And again, I have that $65 off coupon for Airbnb if you would like to try it out for yourself. I recommend that you do because Airbnb is great. I've hardly ever had any bad experiences with it. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to me, or I can do another video in more depth than Airbnb or anything like that. So until the next video, bye.